Hi there, Michael Palladini, aka MacGyver to all my YouTube friends. Well, today we're going to do another video on my wife's little BMW 330 Ci here. It's 2002. And what will happen to them is the PCV, or positive crankcase ventilation system, will get clogged up with a sludge kind of sort of that's from condensation, not sludge like not changing your oil. It's the way they do the PCV system on these cars, and it's kind of a I mean, I don't know if you call it a design flaw or what it is, but you know, the PCV system on these cars is so complicated, and they will, like I said, they'll clog up, and what that does is that allows you know, too much pressure to build up in the crankcase, and it causes problems with the computer. It'll start throwing codes and running, you know, the pressure builds up and then gets into the intake tract and throws the mixture off, and you have misfires and all that sort of thing. So today we're going to fix that, so I'm going to show you what we all have to buy and do to get this done. Now I will say this, since I've not done this to this particular car, I've replaced what they call an oil separator valve on my 740, which is completely, totally different than this. It's always nice to look around and see if you can find some references on blogs and stuff that where maybe somebody who did it before you, because it's always nice to learn from other people's mistakes, in my opinion. So what I did was, where I bought a lot of my parts, they also have a tech blog where people can post stuff and various projects, and the folks, some are better than others, but you know, it's just guys like me that document their project or their repair and post it to the blog for the benefit of others. So it's www.bavauto.com, and lots of good, helpful, useful information there. So I just printed out the blog post with all the pictures and everything, and like I said, lots of good stuff in there that would be a gotcha if you didn't know about it ahead of time. So I'll show you what all we had to buy here. Okay, so what we have here, when you go on the, you know, I rarely go to the dealer for any parts. As far as BMWs go, Porsche, Mercedes, you know, there's so many websites out there that just beat the pants off the dealers in a lot of cases on parts. Sometimes the dealer's cheaper on stuff, but very rarely. For example, here, to do this project, we've got our, basically, what would be a PCV valve on a regular car. And you notice this has some kind of foamy insulation on it, and it was a design improvement to help reduce the amount of condensation that builds up in these lines and valves and stuff, where they get clogged up with you know, kind of a milky, oily spooge. And this is actually what BMW refers to as the cold weather package. So it insulates this valve. Now I'm going to venture a good guess that on Tammy's BMW here, that this one's does not have the cold weather package, and therefore it won't have all this insulation around the valves. And then you have some tubing, various tubes and pipes and such. Again, these are insulated to reduce the incidence of condensation. There's another one here, and then some, you know, the special vacuum line that you probably will never find anywhere. And it all came in, all these items minus these two here, all were packaged as a kit. So it's really useful. It run us about 180 bucks. And I'm also, in this case, I'm changing the valve cover gasket because I noticed that it was leaking. The car's getting up there in miles, so I'm sure that the one that's in there is hardened up pretty good. And when you're working on the M54 6-cylinder engines, you buy a valve cover gasket. You always want to make sure that you also order the valve cover grommets that go inside the captive nuts or bolts that screw the valve cover down, because these, for some odd reason, never come with the valve cover gasket set. So anyway, moving right along, we'll start getting into our project here. Okay, so the first things we're going to do is we have to remove the air filter box assembly here, and then the cabin filter and tray, and then this little harness here, we're going to disconnect that and lay that out off to the side, because we're going to be all down into here. So. You know, I always love these blogger posts that just gloss over certain steps of the process. And on this particular guy's blog post here, he said, remove intake bellows. Use care when removing the vacuum hoses from the plastic F fitting. The fitting is likely brittle. Well, okay, that's the silly thing here, no problem there. But what they don't tell you is that the air bellows, which goes on basically like this, has the clamp facing that way towards the back of the engine, and this one same way, and it's impossible to get to. So count on that taking you about 20 to 30 minutes if you have a lift, longer if you don't. Alright, let's give you a look in here at what we're going after. You can't really see much, I guess, but that piece right there that I'm bouncing on, that's the old separator valve that we're having to get out. And you have to pull the throttle body out, and I think originally at one time BMW recommends you just pull the intake, but doing it this way, you know, it saves you a little trouble getting the intake off. Of course, I'm sure taking the intake off makes it probably a lot easier to get that valve out, but either way, it's a bear of a job. Like I said, I don't recommend anybody buy one of these unless you either have the money to not worry about how much it costs to fix, or you can fix it yourself like me. So, but it's kind of a love-hate relationship sometimes. Okay, so I've got the throttle body and the valve, separator valve back in, and going back together with it. I got incredibly greasy, so I didn't want to be handling the camera here. And the new hose coming up through here and here, and see, these are all the old stuff here, and this is the old separator valve. You notice it doesn't have any of the insulation on it, and not as much slime and sludge as I would have expected in there. So we'll be looking in other areas for our misfire code too while we're in here. So, but other than that, we'll just keep plugging along here, and then the next thing we'll be doing is we'll be taking this valve cover off, so then we'll get to see some neat stuff in there. Alright? Okay, so now we're getting over here towards the valve cover gasket. Once you take the pretty cover off, then you've got all the coil packs under there. I'm fixing to pull all those out and check the plugs and everything while we're in there. And there's a little harness runs down the side of the valve cover. We'll have to get that out of there too. So that's going to be next. Okay, now we have the valve, all the coils out, and the valve cover off. And this is the dual vanos right here, which is a variable cam timing, which helps this motor make the amount of power that it does. It's all good and clean in there. And we've got our new valve cover gasket here. This is our old one. And there's the little grommets that go in there where the spark plugs go. That's these. So we're going to change all that and put it all back together and then fire her up and see how she does. Alright, so while I'm in here, I'm going to go ahead and change plugs out. BMW uses these NGK Iridium 4-way electrode plugs. Since I don't know when they were replaced last, I'm going to go ahead and change them out. Because it has that aluminum head in there, we go ahead and put some of that copper anti-seize, especially made for spark plugs, on there, on the threads, so they don't get galled in there and stuff. Okay, so we're back. One of the things that I also wanted to check on this, given the car's mileage now, it's getting up there over 100,000, is its version of an intake manifold runner control. If you recall one of my previous videos on the Ford truck, the 98 Ford truck, where the vehicle is experiencing a lot of codes, and this engine is really not that much different because it has the same basic device, only it's a lot simpler in practice, and it's just basically a little box here on the intake, which I'll show you, and we'll take it out and see. This one in particular is all made of plastic, so they have a tendency of the plastic to get brittle and piece to break in there, and if it gets stuck, it will also cause some of the codes we're having with this car. Now, in doing the oil separator valve and all those lines and everything, we fixed a bunch of vacuum leaks, so we're good in that, and car will be good to go for another 100,000 with that. But and using the cold weather kit version of that package will eliminate the possibility of any condensation sludge building up in those lines. So let's take a look at this here. I'll show it to you, get you a better close-up view of it. Okay, this is it right here, and we'll just pop this down out of the way. There's two little torque screws that hold it on there. We'll get it out of there and see what it looks like. Okay, so as was evidenced by the fact that it was darn near impossible to pull this thing out of the intake manifold, told me that this was broken, because what had happened is that this little flap here is made onto that, and it should be able to turn one way or the other. Well, you see the round access hole with the seal around it. Well, this was broken laying down in there and wedged in like that, which prevented me from getting it out. So The one thing that you want to try and do when you mess with one of these is to gather up all the pieces, and for that we have, except for one little white piece that was down in here, and we want to find that in the intake. So we'll get that out of here, and we'll get this thing on order. It's about $100+ part, as is everything on a BMW. So, and it's always nice to know when you find your smoking gun.